Hey AP Latin students, hope you guys are doing well. We're going to start our review today. Had you go over Aeneid, book 1, lines 1 through 49. Like I said, of course, you don't have to upload a translation or anything like that because we've already done that. I just want you to review it, and then I'm going to kind of touch on some details and some references and everything that are being made. Most of it's probably not going to be new, but hopefully it'll be a decent review. And I'll have some questions for you on LMS if you can just you can answer those pertaining to the content and the stories. And grammar and all that stuff that we're going over. It's not gonna be a lot, but probably 5 to 10 questions a day, based off the review passages. Okay, so starting off, with epic poetry, it's very the beginning is one of the most important parts because the author is going to lay before you what he is what he's trying to convey, and kind of the overall theme of his story. And Virgil does that really well. In actually just the first couple words, arma vorumque cano. So I sing of arms and a man. So those are going to be kind of his two themes: weapons, and then the man, Aeneas himself. And also, as we mentioned, this is kind of a hearkening back to Homer, as Virgil constantly does throughout the whole book. The first half of the Aeneid is largely based off of Homer's Odyssey, because it has to do with Odysseus's wanderings, and then the second half will be largely based off Homer's Iliad, with the warfare that Aeneas has to fight in kind of establishing his people. Okay, and also he talks about the wrath of Juno, line 4, and that is going to be another kind of major theme that propels the storyline through it. And also a couple things to note here too, as far as rhetorical terms. You'll notice on account of the unforgetting anger of savage Juno, fierce Juno. So you'll notice that the unforgetting is actually modifying the anger, whereas logically it would be going with Juno, unforgetting Juno, but it's technically modifying anger. And this is a rhetorical device known as transferred epithet. Okay, so it's transferred from the word that it logically would go with. The other kind of fancy name for it is enalage. Okay, so enalage, or transferred epithet. And also you'll notice actually with those words that there is kind of an interlocking word order as well. So A, B, A, B. And that's another rhetorical device known as synchesis. Okay, so enalage is transferred epithet, and then synchesis is that interlocking word order. Okay, and then we see that enalage again on line 7 when he talks about the walls of lofty Rome. Logically, the walls would be what's lofty and not Rome, but you know. And also, but it does do a kind of nice little bit to color the fact that Rome is going to be its fame is going to reach the stars, as it were. So that's one kind of really nice thing with Roman poetry, is that you can get different shades of meaning, and hopefully you've been able to see some of that with as we translated Virgil, just the placement of words and everything. Okay, the next little section here, the invocation of the muse. This is a huge, well, not huge. It's an important part of epic poetry, and you'll see it in the majority of classical epics, and it's the poet is invoking the muse, calling the muse to help him, because his his task before him is greater than a mortal can bear on his own. So he needs divine help, divine inspiration, and the word muse has even come over into kind of common speech to mean someone's muse is their inspiration for their art or whatever. And the muses, there were 9 of them. And the muse for epic poetry is named Calliope. So she's an important one. All right. So the line 8, he invokes the muse. Okay, and then the next section, we get some of the reasons why Juno is so furious with the Trojans. Okay, and Virgil starts by introducing Carthage. Okay, because that is where Aeneas is going to end up pretty soon. And Carthage was, as you know, very dear to Juno, and also talks about the island of Samos, where Juno was raised in her youth. Okay, but Carthage was very dear to Juno, and they were rich, very very wealthy, and that's one thing historically we know about Carthage was they were just fantastically wealthy because of their trade. They just were a really excellent traders. So they got money from all across the Mediterranean. Okay, and it also talks about them being very fierce in the pursuits of war. So they were strong military, largely because of at least from the Punic Wars, because of their mercenary force. But they nearly brought Rome to its knees, nearly destroyed Rome, as we know from history. All right, and that's one thing to kind of keep in mind too, as you are reviewing, that there's that kind of constant undertone, I guess you could say, of the Punic Wars in the whole episode with Dido and Aeneas and all that. That should constantly kind of be in the back of your mind, and just to kind of color things a little bit, I guess you could say. Okay, and he talks about how Juno wanted this to be a kind of almost like a light to the nations, that it would be kind of a world power, basically, but that there's this prophecy basically that she had heard that the Trojans would be coming and kind of overthrowing Carthage, and that happens in a way when Dido dies. But more emphatically, of course, in the Punic Wars. Okay, and then we get the reference of the Parcae, which are the fates. Okay, those are the fates, the destiny. These 3 sisters that would kind of spin and weave the outcome of people's lives and all that. Okay, and then we get some more reasons why Juno hates the Trojans. Obviously, one of the most obvious ones is the judgment of Paris, where Paris didn't say she was the prettiest one. So the Judicium Pardis, line 27, and then the insult to her spurned beauty. That's kind of going along with the judgment of Paris. So she's not the prettiest one. And then the hateful race. So she kind of transfers that hatred not just to Paris, but to the whole of Trojan race. And your book's got a good note that not just because of Paris, but also Dardanus, who is one of the founders of the Trojans, was the son of Jupiter and another woman. So, as you know, Jupiter was notoriously unfaithful. So that was kind of a constant reminder, as your book says, of Jupiter's infidelity. And further, kind of going with Jupiter's infidelity, it talks about the honors of ravished Ganymede, and Ganymede was a Trojan youth that Jupiter became an eagle and kind of like took him up to heaven to be his cupbearer and lover as well, which is rather disturbing. And it also kind of gives precedent, I guess, to some of the practices of the Greeks and the Romans as well, of the practice called pederasty, which is not going to really get into, but it's one of the rather disturbing elements of classical society, I guess you could say. So she is mad about Ganymede as well. Okay, so she's got all these things kind of brewing within her. All right, and then she keeps them far off from Troy as long as she can. Okay. And then let's see here. Oh, another rhetorical device to take note of. If you look on line 32, you'll see having been driven, they were wandering, or having been driven by the fates, they were wandering around all the seas. So you'll notice it's Maria omnia circum, so the preposition comes at the end, and that kind of inversion of that word order, the typical word order, it's called anastrophe. Okay, so that's another important term to be aware of. All right, and then the last section here, lines 34 to 49, you kind of get a little bit of this in medias res going on. I think it'll get probably a little more proper in medias res later on, but this is, I guess this would be kind of the start of the in medias res. So you get the Trojans, they're off, setting sail, and Juno is kind of talking to herself, and she kind of gives this little speech about her terrible fate and how things are just so unfair, and she brings the point up that, hey, I'm like the queen of the gods, and I can't do what I want, so what's up with this? And she brings up one particular incident with Minerva, how she destroyed one man and I think several ships as well for an offense during the Trojan War. The guy was named Ajax, son of Oileus. He's also known as Ajax the Lesser, and he had raped Cassandra, taken her away from like the altar, I think, for Minerva, and Athena, obviously, or Minerva, was extremely angry about this. So she took it out and impaled him on a sharp rock, which is pretty awesome. And he was breathing flames out of his chest, so that's kind of cool. So in other words, don't mess with Minerva. But Juno uses that as kind of a, hey, if she can do that, why can't I? And she kind of just bemoans her fate, and she also says, hey, who's gonna honor me now after all this sort of thing? And that would be kind of an example of rhetorical question. She uses that a couple times in here. She's not actually talking to anyone, but it's a rhetorical question. Okay, and then let's see here. Oh yes, a couple other things to note. at least one other thing. It talks about at the beginning of this section, they were plowing the sprays of salt with bronze, and the salt there is being used. They're not actually going through salt. It's a it's a way of saying the sea, and that's a rhetorical device known as metonymy. Okay, and we've talked about that one before, but that's an important one to know. Okay, and also the word bronze as well. They're not actually technically using bronze to go through salt. It's just the ships were tipped with bronze, so the word bronze is being used for the word ship. Okay, so that's the word metonymy, is where you kind of you use one word in place of something else to refer to something else. All right. So that's just kind of a just quick recap. I hope some of that was helpful, bringing back some terms and a little bit of the story behind some of these guys. Let me know if you have any questions, and for next time we will go from lines 50 to, hold on. Sorry about that. We'll go from lines 50 to line 91. Okay, so that'll be our section for tomorrow. So review that, and then have some questions for you about those, and we'll do another video. And if there's anything you want me to focus on, any questions you have, please do not hesitate to ask. Okay, so love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.